Our tradition teaches us that what is revealed about Christ in the New Testament can also be found hidden in the Old Testament. Jesus fulfills the Scriptures. We need to study the Old in order to understand the New. I think that we study the Old also to understand ourselves. Sometimes Christ is so unique that it is difficult to relate to Christ. The Old Testament gives us stories of people a bit like Christ, but a bit like ourselves. That's where Abraham helps us. Abraham is an example of faith and a friend of God, but also a bit broken at times. Tonight, I want to compare the Via Dolorosa of Christ to the journey of Abraham. I think if we compare Abraham and Christ, we will understand their suffering a little better. Ultimately, I think we can encounter meaning in our own sorrows and the sorrows of our neighbors if we understand how sorrows sometimes work in God's plans. When I was growing up, we called it the Stations of the Cross. When I lived in Jerusalem, we called it the Via Dolorosa, the Sorrowful Way. Tonight, I'm going to call it the Via Dolorosa, mainly because we all have sorrows on our way. Only figuratively do we all bear a cross. I'm going to be talking about enough figures of Christ tonight that I don't need to add more. I will connect all 14 stations to the story of Abraham, but following the order of the life of Abraham, not the order of the stations. If you're planning to walk the stations while I talk, I hope you have a fitness tracker. You'll get lots of steps in. Jesús muere. The story of Abraham starts in Genesis chapter 12, and I'm going to start at station number 12. Jesus dies. What does it mean to die? How did I feel when Grandma died? It felt like she was going away from the rest of us. I believed that she had more blessings ahead of her, but it was still sorrowful. The journey to death was sorrowful, her death was sorrowful, and the journey ahead was uncertain. When the story of Abraham opens, I think we first hear it as glorious, a miraculous moment of grace and chosenness. Let us listen again for the sorrows that Abraham and his family must have felt. The Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your land, your relatives, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you. All the other families of the earth will find blessing in you." Just not your original family, I guess. Abram went as the Lord directed him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram's departure must have felt like death to his family. Belief in God's purpose for Abraham, for the death of Jesus, for the death of Grandma, is sorrowful, but meaningful. The euphemism for dying in Hebrew is to be gathered to your people. So that when Abraham's death is described at the end of the story in chapter 25, verse 8, it sounds like the opposite of Genesis chapter 12. In 12, he's separated from his people. In 25, he's gathered to his people. But being gathered to his people means he died. Can we accept that death is as much about gathering home as it is about separation? Jesús cae tres veces. The 3rd, 7th, and 9th stations are Jesus falling 3 times. It would not be the same to have a single station for falling 3 times. It is the repetition more than the falling that is sorrowful. And that sounds right to me. The sorrows that keep happening over and over are worse than one sorrow that came and went. Abraham has this problem too. 3 times in Genesis, Abraham, or his son Isaac, hands over his wife to protect himself. Each time it is a disgrace. It may or may not have been a lie to say that his wife was his sister. The disgrace is to hand over any woman to sex trafficking. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know that you are a beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'She is his wife,' and they will kill me, but let you live. Please say, therefore, that you are my sister, so that I may fare well on your account, and my life may be spared for your sake." The story leaves us to wonder how Sarah felt about this. The fact that God protected Sarah does not make it any better that Abraham did not learn his lesson or teach it to his son. The same thing happens again in Genesis chapter 20. The same thing happens again in Genesis chapter 26. Scholars would say that this redundancy is the result of the process of editing together oral traditions. The story, as it comes to us, is a story of sorrow that is magnified as it repeats and repeats. As we repent of our sins during Lent, what is more sorrowful than the sin that never seems to stay away for long? Simon ayuda a Jesus. The hero of the Abraham story is not Abraham, but God. God is in charge of carrying out God's promises. God makes things work out in the end, despite Abraham's worst flaws. God seems to have a sense of humor about pushing people into unexpected roles. Each time Abraham or Isaac sacrifices a wife because he fears for his own safety, God turns the feared bad guy into the good guy. God not only prevents Pharaoh from raping Sarah, God causes Pharaoh to make Abraham wealthy on his way out. Certainly, this is not an example of reward for good deeds, but an example of God's grace coming from unexpected directions. The list of gifts is longest in the case of Abimelech. Then Abimelech took flocks and herds and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham, and he restored his wife Sarah to him. Then Abimelech said, "Here, my land is at your disposal. Settle wherever you please." To Sarah he said, "I hereby give your brother 1,000 shekels of silver." Personally, I think Abraham should have freed the slaves, and Abimelech should have given the money to Sarah. But again, Abraham is the focus as the recipient of God's unmerited gifts. At any rate, these role reversals and God's gifts coming from unexpected directions remind me of Simon of Cyrene, the fifth station. The Gospels don't tell us much except that the Romans compelled him, so I think it is safe to say that he was there for bad reasons and helped against his will. No matter. It was God's will that Jesus not be the only one to carry a cross that day. Sometimes we, like Simon, like Pharaoh, like Abimelech, have to carry a cross we were not expecting. Sometimes relief comes from someone we did not consider a friend. Can we accept that both are from God? Veronica limpia el rostro de Jesús. Sometimes a gift comes out of an encounter in sorrow. That's what happens when Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. Jesus leaves her with his image. What a way to remember Jesus. Abraham has a strange encounter with a priest named Melchizedek. As with Jesus, it comes in a time of sorrow. Abraham faces armed conflict in order to protect his family. The encounter is just as mysterious as the encounter with Veronica. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. He blessed Abram with these words, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, the creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who delivered your foes into your hand." The priesthood of the God of Abraham would not be officially established for several hundred more years in the days of Moses and Aaron. What is even more mysterious is the priestly offering of bread and wine, which was not a common offering at the time. The image is familiar to us in our remembrance of Jesus, the Eucharist, which was instituted far in the future for Abraham. In one case, Veronica received a remembrance of Jesus in the image on the cross she used to wipe the face of Jesus. In the other case, Abraham received remembrance of Jesus in the substance of the Eucharist. It seems that it is important to Jesus that we remember him. Jesús encuentra a su madre. At station 4, Jesus meets his mother. In the Abraham story, it's not so much that Abraham meets his mother as it is that Abraham tries to meet a mother for his children. God had often promised Abraham descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky, but Abraham's confidence in God was in tension with his lack of confidence in his barren wife, Sarah. But Abram said, "Lord God, what can you give me? If I die childless and have only a servant of my household, Eliezer of Damascus. Look, you have given me no offspring, so a servant of my household will be my heir." Then the word of the Lord came to him, "No, that one will not be your heir. Your own offspring will be your heir." Abraham had already denied that Sarah was married so that she might be dragged off by the Egyptians. Sarah might be getting a little bit nervous about what Abraham might do next to make room for a new mother. What happens next can only be described as tragic, especially for Hagar. She has her own Via Dolorosa, her own sorrowful way. Already a slave, now her sexuality and procreativity are claimed as property. She did what was expected of her, but her life only got worse. She fled from abuse only to be told to return and submit to abuse. Finally, once Abraham meets his real mother, meaning the mother to his heir, Hagar is disposable. Early the next morning, Abraham got some bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. Then, placing the child on her back, he sent her away. One of my hobbies is backpacking, and I love to backpack in the desert. I've backpacked in the Sinai Desert, the Judean Desert, and right here in Texas in Big Bend National Park. At the very minimum, one needs to carry a gallon of water per day to survive in the desert. And even that is dangerous on a hot day. Sending a mother and child away with no more than a skin of water is a death sentence. It was just enough to get her out of sight before dying. As she roamed aimlessly in the wilderness of Beersheba, the water in the skin was used up. So she put the child down under one of the bushes and then went and sat down opposite him, about a bow shot away, for she said to herself, "I cannot watch the child die." As she sat opposite him, she wept aloud. "No puedo ver morir a mi hijo." I cannot watch my child die. These words bring us back to Mary on the Via Dolorosa. What strength Mary had to be with her son as he carried the cross. What strength Mary had to stand at the foot of the cross while he died. What strength Mary had to take on in that moment the responsibility to become the mother of the church, starting with John. What strength Mary had to listen to us every time we say the Hail Mary and ask her to be with us at the hour of our death. So many children she has been with when they die. Hagar's Via Dolorosa shows us the sorrows of Mary, our mother, whom we all meet at the hour of our death. Jesús es despojado. Through all of Abraham's missteps, God always seems to clean up the mess. God protected Sarah from Pharaoh and Abimelech. God protected Hagar and Ishmael. God stands with Abraham, but I think God might have a sense of humor. God affirms the promise of descendants, but adds the condition of circumcision. I have no recollection of my own circumcision as an infant, but I had a friend who was circumcised as an adult. He described it as a distinctly unpleasant experience. It is certainly not an intuitive step if the goal is to make babies. To be honest, it sounds like an awkward conversation to be having with the creator of the universe. If that wasn't bad enough, Abraham had to go around circumcising all the males of his household, which is quite a few if you add up all the numbers of servants in the story so far. Then Abraham took his son Ishmael and all his slaves, whether born in his house or acquired with money, every male among the members of Abraham's household, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins on that same day, as God had told him to do. Abraham was 99 years old when the flesh of his foreskin was circumcised. Meanwhile, at station 10, Jesus is stripped of his garments. I might be tempted to give Abraham the distinction of the more sorrowful way on this point, or at least I would if the point were only shame. Jesus had already warned us that the needs of all people are connected to Jesus. When the nations are judged, some say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or ill or in prison and not minister to your needs?" It is not just Jesus who is stripped of garments, but all the least ones among us. We cannot deny the reality of poverty and unjust deprivation when we stand at station 10. If we are sad and indignant that Jesus is deprived, we must remember that Jesus told us to feel the same way about the least among us. Abraham's story up through Genesis 17 brought us to about half of the 14 stations of the Via Dolorosa. Next week, we will continue in the same way. Perhaps some of you see how the remainder of Abraham's journey will bring us past the stations where Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem, is condemned to death, takes up his cross, is nailed to the cross, is taken down from the cross, and is laid in the tomb. I also think there might be some surprises. Meanwhile, this is a good place to stop and reflect on the stations we have already visited. Again, out of order. We compared Abraham leaving his family to the death of Jesus. Abraham fails his wife 3 times as Jesus falls 3 times. Abraham receives some extra assistance from God through unexpected people as Jesus receives help from Simon of Cyrene. Abraham encounters a preliminary model of the remembrance of Jesus in the Eucharist, as Veronica receives the image of Jesus with which to remember him. Abraham searches for a mother for his heir as Jesus meets his mother. Abraham is stripped of his foreskin as Jesus is deprived of his garments. I hope this will add something to your walking the Via Dolorosa of Jesus this evening. Remember the sorrows of Jesus, fulfill the scriptures, and give meaning to our own sorrow. Thank you.